This is a in-person interview. Often I do these online, but we're in person today, face to face, which is extra special because it means we're like live humans in the same room.
Yeah.
And I know you from different avenues. We did an interview many years ago on Psychologists Off the Clock, talking about your beautiful book that had come out a couple of years ago. But today we're going to talk about deep resilience, which is a term that you have coined and I think will resonate for many, even if they don't even know what it means yet. You'll walk us through what it means, but will resonate for many because it's what we're craving and what we're needing collectively and individually right now. Deep resilience.
Mm-hmm. That's right. I think that's absolutely right. Yeah. And I think, maybe just to kind of say, where the term came from. I mean, we hear so much about resilience and the need for resilience. I think there's a sort of a recognition, well, it kind of goes without saying what a kind of stressful world we're all living in, on so many fronts. And what I didn't realize until I kind of started looking at some of the kind of data around this and some of the research around this was just how incredibly common burnout is in the general population. Because I had done, I sort of became interested, just backing up a little bit, I'd become interested in this whole area in my medical work back in 2008 when I was asked to be part of a group writing an article on burnout and compassion fatigue and moral distress in clinicians working at the end of life for a medical journal. And so in the course of that, I kind of learned a lot about the difference between the different kind of so-called stress syndromes that we can suffer in a kind of a work setting, but really in a life setting as well. But I also, was kind of looking at the data back then, and it was talking about, some 30% of all physicians and nurses kind of experiencing some degree of burnout. Well, recent large international kind of studies, and, I don't want to spend too much time on all of that, but just to make the point that, this huge international study that was done in many countries, kind of going across all the different age groups, found prevalence of burnout, symptoms of burnout in about 70% of people, 70% of individuals, and in over 80% of Gen Zers. So, we're all just recovering from the COVID pandemic, but we're in this ongoing rolling pandemic of burnout, really. And so there's the kind of sense of, the need for resilience, but there's also the sense of how a lot of the strategies that we've been used to and many of us practicing are just not enough.
Yeah.
Self-care as we know it is just not enough.
Right.
And so we need something more. We need deep resilience. Yeah.
It's funny. I had a migraine yesterday, and I was recording my book in a recording studio, and the producer that was there was like, "Oh, let me go get you some Advil." And I looked at him like, "You've never had a migraine. Advil is not enough." So when you were saying that, I mean, I think the depth of and the intensity of the burnout, and that burnout being physical exhaustion, being this detachment that people also feel, where they feel sort of almost like a lack of empathy, and that like you can't contact the caring because the caring is so painful, and then also this performance decline or belief that you're not performing as well, and that trifecta that is really in the syndrome. When they describe, ICD looks at those symptoms, how deep they go and how parched people are, that an Advil is not enough, self-care is not enough, And that's
a good
what
night's sleep is
a good
not
night's
enough.
sleep is
A
not enough.
weekend off.
No, vacation's not going to cure
in a
it for you.
spa isn't enough.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, and it's at such high levels. And then there's also the looming doom, right? So there's knowing that this is not the end of difficulty coming our way, right? So when we look at our college students, I've been teaching this class for college students on resilience, and they're fully aware of the future they're walking into. And that's part of that, you know, part of the burnout. So I'd love to go through the 5 steps of deep resilience that you've put together. They stem from nature, from deep contemplative practice. I mean, tell us a little bit about the origins of these.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. So these 5 lessons on deep resilience are really lessons that I've learned from different teachers, but I would say my root teacher is the Redwood.
Oh.
and nature. And that's where I kind of seem to have learned my most profound lessons. And then I find then afterwards kind of resonances coming from other teachers and other traditions, and that really affirm those kind of teachings that I've been introduced to. But anyway, just the story behind these kind of five steps to deep resilience is the story of a particular redwood that I came across in 2018, and I was able to I had a little writing cabin up in Big Sur. I didn't have a writing cabin. I had access to a writing cabin that I was able to go to and during the pandemic. But so I went up there, but I on this particular occasion, I went with some trepidation because I heard that wildfire had just spread through that area. I didn't know how close it was to where I was going. But as I approached, I realized it had scorched that entire area. And so I kind of wandered into this very burnt forest and came across this blackened stump of a huge redwood, must be maybe 6-7 feet across. I couldn't get my arms around it. And it was blackened, but the other thing about it is its trunk was broken mid shaft. So it had obviously, in the firestorm, another tree must have fallen, hit the redwood with such impact that it broke its trunk, its massive trunk, and yet here it was still standing. So that was kind of impressive in itself. I really took it for dead. It looked, charcoal, and everything around it was just ashes and broken branches and fallen trees. And so I next got back to visit that area in the summer of 2021. And I walked through the forest, and I was kind of delighted to see kind of green shoots everywhere. So it was kind of already in recovery mode. But as I came to that area, I remembered the broken redwood, and I thought, gosh, I would love to kind of just see where that's at. And at first I just didn't recognize it. But then I realized, my goodness, this flourishing green being before me was the redwood stump. Emerging from its trunk, coming up from the base roots, were all these green shoots. It was utterly, not just utterly alive, it had not just survived, but it was thriving. And so I've been back a number of times since then, and each time I visit, and each time it's kind of growing more and more from a recovering redwood into a flourishing redwood, and it's now a beautiful tree. And so I've just thought a lot about it. How did it both survive, which it needed to do in the first instance? I mean, survival is kind of top of the list. You just have to get through the firestorm, but then go on from there to recovery and to thriving, which is really where it's at. And so that's where I thought about it, and in terms of these kind of five teachings, which really kind of move from the trunk down into the root system, and then back from the root system back into the branches. So, stop me at any time, but I can kind of tell you a little bit what those 5 teachings are.
Well, let's pause, because I think it would be helpful to take the metaphor to the human, and then we can kind of go back and forth, because you've worked with for a long time in palliative care. I see you at the hospital every once in a while, or I'll be like going in to visit someone, and Michael Kearney's going out, or I'll run into your wife Rodley, and you're kind of known for going and meeting people who are at the end of life, which in some ways we think like, well, could you do deep resilience then if you're not going to actually survive? But there's a different type of survival, right? So the resilience that could happen even when you know you're going to pass, or the ending of your life. But in terms of the human condition, like to survive, it's not just physically to survive, like make it through, live through something. But I would say it's like for your essence, your life force to survive, not to be, completely smashed by whatever experience people are going through. So the fire could be a metaphor like a divorce, or the fire could be a metaphor like, a job loss, or the fire of what's happening globally, just like feeling like we're on fire right now as a country.
Our world is on fire.
Our world is on fire, the polycrises, or the fire of an addiction. I mean, it's like how you survive an addiction, all these things that you do need to survive. You need to get to the other side of it, but that's not enough, right? When you think about an addiction, it's not enough just to stop using. You actually need the thriving aspect of things. So in terms of your experience, before we move into the deep resilience steps, your experience as a physician, what does that look like for you in terms of humans, the metaphor of the redwood for the human?
Well, what it looks like is, that, in a way, what I do in palliative care, what we do in palliative care is we do everything we can to make somebody's experience less dominated by pain or other kind of distressing physical symptoms. We offer emotional, psychological support. I would call those one aspect of palliative care, but akin to self-care. It's kind of looking after the individual in the best possible way, taking care. And one of my kind of key guiding teachers in palliative care is actually the person who started the hospice movement, Cicely Saunders, in London, who I was lucky enough to work with some 40 years ago or so. But she used to say, the way care is given can reach the most hidden place, an open space for unexpected development. So, simple acts of care can be care of the soul, and so it begins with that. And so what I've seen is that someone who has come into that, into depth, into that place in themselves that isn't afraid, that doesn't die, that kind of deepest ground of being. And I'm certainly a follower of the Buddha Dharma, and get a lot of comfort from those teachings. Thinking of that deepest innate beingness as a place of wholeness, as a place of fullness, as a place of wellness, that isn't afraid, that doesn't die. And observing over time, not in everybody, no, in fact, really one would wish one could prescribe it, but one can't. But one, I think, can create conditions that facilitate its emergence and its recognition. But the natural process of, it seems to me, of approaching death is that Buddha nature, if you like, or that deepest ground of being, that there is some agency, that there's some wisdom within that is coming to the surface, that is coming towards the ego, if you like, which is that, very useful, but at the end of life, not very useful, and often very frightened, very clinging, very holding on part of ourselves. And something deeper is emerging that isn't afraid, that doesn't die, that is well, that is whole. And kind of the simple acts of care that we do in our everyday palliative care kind of facilitate that emergence and that recognition and that resting into, which is kind of happens kind of naturally in a way anyway. So one is working deeply with the natural process, I think, a natural process.
And as a healthcare provider, working with a person who is dying, or for me as a psychologist, working with a person who's depressed, or working with a person who's really severely anxious, like the manifestation in front of you is the burnt redwood, right? And I think as the provider, or even if you're in a relationship and the person across from you is in extreme distress, you have to see past the burnt redwood to see that true nature that's still within, the potential for growth, or the alive part that sometimes is underground. We don't see it. It's deeper inside. It's that the edges are burnt, but inside there's some healthy wood, that you hold that possibility for a human. And that we could hold that possibility for each other, even when we're in that state of burnout, like literal burnout as that redwood. And you knew to go back. I mean, that was sort of like also that thing, like, I want to go back and see how it's doing, right?
There's a sort of curiosity, but there's also, kind of some kind of connection with that and some sort of caring.
And caring.
Yeah.
I love a burnt redwood. That's like my, I love a human that has some dark edges. It's been through some things. So the first deep resilience practice is self-care. You're saying it's more than you need more than the Advil, but you got to try the Advil first.
Well, so the first lesson from the redwood, in the words of the redwood, is take care, protect yourself, know what feeds you and what restores you, and unlike my rigid trunk, be flexible if possible, like my branches and those grasses close by. So the redwood's deep resilience and thriving couldn't have happened without its bark. It's, the redwood has this, I don't know if you know about the redwood bark, but it's really thick and it's got all these tannins in it, which are fire resistant and, insect resistant, so highly protective. So we need our protection, we need our boundaries, we need our time out, we need to know what restores us, what brings us back, when we're depleted, when we're exhausted. And so its amazing root system couldn't have done what it did if that fire had not, if its trunk not only been broken, but if that fire had kind of burned through into the inner structures of the redwood and kind of damaged those kind of delicate xylem systems that transport the water up and down and the minerals and the sugars and all of that. If the fire had got through to that, it wouldn't matter about its amazing root system. So self-care is essential. It's important, it's essential, but it's not enough.
So knowing what feeds you is going to be different for everybody. Some people are palm trees, some people are redwoods, some people are oak trees, some people are shrubs, right? So what feeds one person may be music. For another person, it may be walking. For another person, it may be solitude. And that's where it does take that sort of like inner kind of going in and getting to know and trying out different.
Absolutely.
And maybe even just remembering. I always ask clients, like, when you were little, what did you do in those hours after school? Like, where did you go?
That's a great
Were you
question.
with people? Were you alone? Did you go to the creek behind your house, or did you go out into the street and play, ball with kids? Were you reading a book? And sometimes that gives you a little insight into before we all got, on our phones, what we do with our few hours after work.
Yeah.
But and what nourishes you, what feeds you may also be part of your culture, your ancestry, what was passed on to you from your parents, your grandparents, and beyond as well. So looking
Absolutely.
into some of that.
Absolutely. What you're saying is beautiful, and I totally agree with you. And it's coming into the next lesson, if I
Yes.
may, which is, in the Redwood's words, ask yourself this question: what are my healing connections? Identify and strengthen these so that threads become cords and cords become ropes of connection. You'll soon realize that you're not alone, and your life will thrum with meaning. So a lot of what you described there, kind of is already moving into, and just, the botanical piece of this, if you like, or the biological piece, is that the reason the redwood didn't fall over and the reason redwoods grow to be over 300 feet tall, the tallest trees in the world, is because of their lateral root system. So I don't know if you know this, but redwoods have notoriously shallow roots, but they go out 60 feet in all directions, and they intertwine and intertangle with the roots of other redwoods and under rocks, and it just gives them this incredible stability. So that's why it was hit with such an impact that it broke its trunk in two, but it was still standing. It was because of its lateral root system. So what are your healing connections? What are the connections that really are meaningful for you? And one of the studies that I think is probably one of the most valuable studies from my field in palliative care in recent years was a study called Healing Connections, Moving from Suffering to a Sense of Well-Being. And very briefly, what they did in this was a qualitative research. So they worked with 20 individuals who were all living with very advanced cancer, very close to the end of their lives. 10 of them were kind of, admittedly, in their own words, very unhappy, very frightened, terrible quality of life, no sense of meaning, feeling out of control. And the other 10 were kind of the opposite. Very similar diagnosis, very similar situations, but the other 10 were saying, actually, this is an incredibly meaningful part of my life. I don't feel in control, but I still feel I have choices. And my quality of life is really good, and despite my body not being in great shape. So they then talked to these 20 individuals, and they tried to understand what made the difference as to which group you ended up in, so to speak. And they found that it all came down to the presence or absence of healing connections. And they identified 4 different kinds of healing connections, kind of a sense of inner connectedness, deep self-compassion and self-knowledge and self-acceptance, connection with others, so one's actual relationships with family, friends, significant others, community, connections through the phenomenal world, through the senses, through music, through nature, through art, through body movement. And the 4th one was connection with ultimate meaning, however that was understood or defined by the individual. Mm-hmm. And if somebody had a kind of vibrant healing connection in any of those 4, it made all the difference. And it tended to generalize. So if one had a really strong connection, let's just say, to kind of an amazing family network of support, that the person tended to feel more connected within themselves, and and often with that sense of healing connection came a sense of meaning. That meaning wasn't an end in itself, and they talk a lot about Viktor Frankl in his work, but meaning wasn't something like an understanding, or it was more a subjective kind of glow that came from feeling connected and interconnected, and that deep web of support.
It makes me think of a conversation I had with Jack Saul. Jack Saul, he works with torture victims, and he's actually Esther Perel's husband, but he's more than Esther Perel's husband. He works with torture victims, and what he talks about is collective resilience and how trauma has a collective impact. It's not just an individual impact, something like torture or trauma. But the resilience of some of these trauma victims were things like prisoners of war who developed a Morse code to knock on the walls with each other. Just that connection of someone else behind that wall is part of what helps me get through this thing. The human connections, but also if you don't have those, we can have non-human connections. I have plenty of clients who their strongest connection is the animal in their home, or they work with fostering animals, or that those can be the sources of resilience.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I remember when my husband was going through a lot of surgeries at UCLA, I would go to the botanical gardens there and walk the botanical gardens, and just the break from being in the hospital to being in the botanical gardens to touching the plants and smelling, and the coolness of the earth that the trees create and that hot LA concrete.
And how you walk into a forested area like that and it's 10 degrees cooler.
It's unbelievable. Yeah. It cools you down. It slows you down. The sounds are softer. The smells are different than all the chemicals.
You're walking into a web of connection.
Yeah, a web of connection. So I think maybe we intuitively know that. Our nervous system knows it, but we're increasingly disconnected from it. So we have to remember this second step, which is healing connections of many forms.
Many forms.
Okay.
Yeah, and I love that concept of collective resilience. That's beautiful. Yeah, that's another way of saying the same thing.
We're all saying the same thing in different ways. But so then the third step. So we send out our roots,
and we tend them. We identify them. We tend them. We kind of maybe recognize there are steps we could take to strengthen them.
Yeah.
But just really appreciating the value of them.
And some of those
they're what
weak
make
ties.
All the difference.
Yeah, even the weak ties that you think are not so strong, those are the ones that are actually also really important too. So people may not have strong friendships, but they go to the same bagel place every day and they see the same face, right? That is one of your real roots.
Absolutely.
And it's important to you. And
absolutely.
You're important to them.
That's
remembering that you matter too. And there's a whole line of research around mattering, feeling like we matter. That's very important. Yeah.
And also the connection between connection and meaning, between those healing connections and a sense of meaning.
Yes.
Those that were kind of felt isolated and trapped in their little bubble of isolation. There's stories in the paper which are kind of heartbreaking because folks are really trying hard to kind of come out of that shell and finding it so hard, but the sense of lack of meaning that goes with that sense of isolation and disconnection, and then the opposite, the sense of connection that kind of comes with the sense of meaning that comes with connection.
It's fascinating how just one connection can turn your whole day around, your whole mood around. It can be like an instant feeling of being energized and lit up from the inside out. And
it's kind of,
fascinating.
I'm sure you do kind of Locke Kelly in his work, and he talks about glimpse practices. Well, one little moment of connection like that is a glimpse practice.
Totally.
Because we're really glimpsing our true nature, our deep nature. We are interbeings, we are, so. Yeah.
Okay, step 3.
Step 3, first of all, in Redwood's words, you are not who you think you are. Ask yourself, who am I? And keep on asking until you remember your deeper identity. And don't worry, relative. Mycorrhizae will help you remember who you really are. So, the redwood didn't fall over because of its lateral root system. It couldn't have survived without its bark. It would have fallen over and not survived without its root system. But what really allowed it to thrive is its deeper roots. Now, redwoods don't have big, deeper roots, but they'll have little fine rootlets that go down from their lateral roots and that merge with the fungal network under the forest, the mycorrhizal network. And they tap into that. And what they tap into very dynamic mutualistic system. So the mycorrhizal network can't make sugar, can't make food. So it gets food from the redwood. In exchange, it gives the redwood water, and it gives the redwood minerals, which the redwood needs to make the food and to survive and to thrive. And so there is this reciprocal, mutualistic give and take between the redwood and the mycorrhizal network. And then the mycorrhizal network, this kind of web, this filament of fungi that kind of spreads under the whole forest, connecting all the trees in the forest. I think we were talking earlier, and you were talking about, we may appear like two individual trees, but we're actually part of the forest. But we're also part of this incredible, web that is kind of the wood wide web, the kind of deep collective, and our deep remembering is our remembering of our deeper identity is somehow remembering that, and not just conceptually, not just can think, oh, that's an interesting insight. Maybe we're more like, like mushrooms are described as the kind of the fruiting body of the mycorrhizal network, that we're really the fruiting body of this kind of web that we're all part of. We think we are individual separate projects, but so it's kind of, in Buddhist terms, it's a kind of emptiness of self practice. It's kind of realizing we're not who we thought we were. And that our deeper, bigger identity is as Thich Nhat Hanh put it, interbeing. We are interconnected, and we are utterly interdependent. Just like the redwood and the mycorrhizal network. So, it's kind of asking ourselves, well, what kind of practices, what kind of experiences bring me into an awareness of that, but also an experience of that? How can I experience that and really rest in that?
We were doing a sound healing in this space last night, or sound journey. The person
beautiful.
that was leading us through it, he said he doesn't call it a sound bath. He doesn't call it a sound healing because he doesn't see himself as a healer. You do your own healing. But he said a sound journey. And there was all these folks from different connections, right? And most people didn't really know each other. And then we laid out all these mats, and they're all lying down next to each other. It was like a big adult slumber party, right? And there was this level of trust. They're all going to lie down in this room. We're going to turn off the lights. Maybe 3 of them had done a sound journey before. And they're closing their eyes. And I was going around and like giving them a little foot massages while the sound, I don't know, what do you call himself? The sound artist went around and made all these incredible sounds. And there was this moment where when I was done, I sat in meditation and just watched the whole thing. And it was like a forest of trees, like these people that didn't know each other, that were trusting, they were just receiving the sound.
Beautiful.
And the energy of the room was so safe and so strong. I could feel it, like the strength of this little space altogether. And it made me think about, I think humans have been in that when we lived closer to the earth, or maybe lived more in community with each other, or understood how to live in community. And maybe there are humans that are living in community very well, how our nervous systems can settle. And my guess is that cellularly, what was happening during that hour of sound journey was probably pretty phenomenal. I mean, Alyssa Epple and Alexander Crosswell, who are like the 2 people that write a lot on deep rest and the cellular regeneration that happens during this, has shown, like, they've shown so much anti-aging, all the repair, the physical repair that can happen.
Happens in that deep surrender.
And that deep surrender. And maybe that's what that tree, like when it connects to its, all of the fungi under there, it's like it's feeding it, it's helping it, and then it's regenerating. And that, you have images in this booklet of what you saw, the green that starts to grow as a result of that connection.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Another of my root teachers, I just see a quote here from her, is Joanna Macy. And her voice on this particular teaching is, she says, both the scientific and the spiritual revolutions ushering us into the third millennium, reveal that our earth is alive. We're not alone here. We're invited back into the pulsing give and take of life itself. If we dare to be real with what we feel, we rediscover the larger being we live within and enter once more the great reciprocity at the heart of the universe. That's Joanna. So it's coming into that, through surrender and through deep receptivity. And there needs to be, you described the sense of safety. There needs to be that sense of safety. I kind of was thinking a lot recently about the difference between safety and security. And there's a story of a little girl who, she's in a room with all her family, uncles, aunts, friends. It's kind of like a big party. She's just 3 years old, but she's separated from her mother. And because she's separated from her mother, she's very distressed, very frightened. But then she finds her mother, and her mother takes her in her arms and walks outside and walks out into a war zone. And it's just, burning buildings, bombed out cars, it's just devastation. But the little girl is now held in security. So in the inside, she was safe, but she was insecure.
Right.
Outside, she's secure. She's deeply secure because she's held in that way. And that allows her to face unsafety and uncertainty with a kind of openness and even some curiosity. She doesn't have to be curled up in a ball. I mean, maybe she would be because of the horrors of it all, but that sense of deep security. And so how do we find that sense of deep security, And I think that's what this deeper web is about, and finding our way into that place.
Right. Yeah. So the security of having someone's hand to hold, even if it's bumpy and it may not even be safe, if you have someone's hand to hold or someone to hold you, or you feel held by the greater just universe, love that's, here, then even in uncertain times or in unsafe times, maybe it's a different experience in them. Okay, number 4. We have 2 more. Number 4.
Okay. So number 4, first of all, in Redwood's words, now that you remember who you really are, all you need to do is rest. Rest. Rest in the great remembering. Rest in the glow of the flow. Allow your mind to rest back, like Rock Brother you see behind me, into the background of its own awareness that's naturally vast, wide open and lucid, like the open sunlit sky. So the redwood, here's the redwood kind of going through this metamorphosis of healing and transformation, from the burnt stump to the little green sprigs to the kind of wonderful, beautiful tree that it now is. And it had really taken all my attention. But just a couple of months back, I was standing before it, and I suddenly noticed in the background, because the sun, it was early in the morning and the sun was just catching it, is this huge granite boulder. And that's something about recognizing what's already here in the background that isn't so obvious, isn't in the foreground catching our attention. That rock was probably, I think it's granite from looking at the other rocks around there. And granite is at least 300 million years old, so it's been there a long time. So it's about noticing what's already here, what's been here for a long time, what's really ancient and really present in a very kind of quiet way. And so for me, that's also ties in with some of what I'm learning from different Buddhist traditions, particularly some of the Tibetan traditions of Vajrayana and Mahamudra, and kind of just recognizing the ground of our own awareness, the background of our own awareness, how we're so preoccupied, absorbed, engaged with the foreground, and, in terms of how our minds work, with our conceptual mind, with our thinking mind, with all our reactive processes. And, it's just so urgent and it's so necessary and it's, and it's so important. It tells us, and we believe it, that so there really needs to be, I think, some quietness, some space. But then it really is only a moment of noticing away, when we just allow our mind to drop back into the background of its own awareness, and just recognize that openness, that vastness that is there, and becoming more and more familiar with that. And what we're really becoming familiar with is the deepest ground of being, kind of the essence of our beingness. I was going to say the deepest part of who we are, but this is almost deeper than who we are. This is part of some, a kind of a physical manifestation of that is that little filamentous mycorrhizal web. But deeper still is this open awareness, luminous openness, peaceful, deeply well. That's the part, when I was talking about what comes to the surface for some folks just naturally, spontaneously, as they're approaching the end of life, where that person suddenly something switches and they're no longer the one being cared for. They're the ones who are the healers to those who are sitting around the bedside.
I think it comes to when people become parents. Sometimes they experience that as well, those glimpses of something that is ancient, the ancient experience of love and wisdom. And I just remember feeling that with my babies, like seeing it in them, seeing the wisdom in my babies, but also just feeling them, like I'm just held in all motherhood of all kinds, it's like
you're stepping into a stream.
It's a stream. It's not mine. It doesn't belong to me. It wasn't my mom's, but it's all mother's. And maybe this comes to us during these profound moments, but we can cultivate it with these practices. And what I'm learning from your partner, Radhalay Weininger, who's a great teacher of these Buddhist practices of Mahamudra, is that we can get them in an instant, and these glimpses. And then eventually, if we work with them, then we know how to step into them. I've been practicing when I'm with a client, or how to. I mean, I feel it when I'm sitting at the back of my heart, and all this other stuff is at the front. Of how to go to the back of my heart and open up to this greater wisdom that's available to us. So, folks that want to do a more sort of Buddhist practice around it, looking into Lot Kelly or some of these Mahamudra practices.
Moments of flow, moments of grace.
Yeah.
That moment at the end of a long hike when you've kind of reached the top of the mountain and you're just looking over the vastness and feeling it within as well as without.
Yeah.
And within all the different spiritual traditions in their sort of mystical understandings and experience, whether we call it the divine or the more, the numinous, whatever words we struggle. The great mystery is probably the best one.
Yeah. And there's certain places that I think energetically, if there's been people practicing or singing in a place a lot, places of worship. I remember I went to Catholic school and we'd go into the mission. I wasn't Catholic. We'd go into the mission and I felt it. I felt an energy in there of just so many people praying in this spot. People talk about it when they go on pilgrimages and they go into a temple. You just feel that the collective energy. Okay, so that's number 4, and then our tree is starting to grow and come back to
Well,
life.
it's really, yeah, I think we've really come into that sort of sense of what deep resilience is about.
Yeah.
You know, that it's way more than protection. Protection is necessary, and restoration and rest, but then we need to stay standing, to stay present, and that's our kind of lateral root system and our cords of connection. And then we need to really everything we need to thrive, and that's our kind of realization of the kind of mutual reciprocal web flow that we're part of. And that all of this and all of us and more is held in this kind of deep open ground of being. And that it's possible, as you say, to glimpse that and over time to recognize it more easily and to rest in that. And maybe even over time that can become one's basis of operation in the world, you know. And recognizing that depth in others, you know, comes, I think, more and more from resting in that depth ourselves. And that's what deep resilience is. And then the kind of 5th lesson is really about kind of coming back into the world, rooted in this way. And here's how Redwood describes it. We thrive because of each other. We need each other. We depend on each other. Your exhale is my inhale. Your inhale, my exhale. We nourish each other. We enliven each other. Sun and I make sugars that feed the forest, and the forest gives me water to drink and makes the clouds that make the rain. We sustain each other. We enliven each other. We need each other. Through this eternal conversation, my roots and branches become a radiance of compassion. You too are this radiance of warmth and flow. This is who you are. Together we are this radiance. So be this radiance in our beautiful but wounded world. So the 5th step is really about the branches. You know, it's like the deeper the roots, the wider the branches. So that's about how we can reach out, how we can be present, how we can stay present, because we're resting in that deeper ground, or the groundless ground, as the mystics call it. And those very branches that are reaching out are also making the sugar with the sun, you know, through photosynthesis, are making the sugars that are then dropping down in the sap, down into the roots, feeding the tree, but then feeding the whole fungal network that's supporting it all, that's giving the water back to the tree. So it's this incredible flow of reciprocity and compassion and presence. And so that's the 5th step.
So the 5th step is about finding the deep resilience that feeds you, but then you feed others back. That the regenerative aspect of it is like the work that you do, right? So even you going to Big Sur to go hike and be in that cabin, right, is probably deep resilience for you personally, Michael Kearney. So then you can come back and be the branches for the patients that you serve, right? Or the writing that you're creating.
And then the very branches, the reaching out, if one is reaching out deeply rooted in that deeper ground, those very branches, just that the metaphor of those branches are where, you know, the sugars are made that feed the tree. So the very act of reaching out and nourishing others is nourishing us.
Yeah. Absolutely. Deeply. I mean, I definitely feel that as a therapist, that a client can nourish me so deeply. I don't know if they know that, how much they're giving to me in that hour session or 50-minute session, that it, I can feel so rejuvenated by that exchange when I'm rooted.
Yeah.
And when I'm not rooted, I can feel so depleted by that exchange.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. And that I guess I want to say something about the burning of the tree, because that tree may burn again. We can't prevent the wildfires. That's actually the burnt tree is part. I actually think that's part of our existence as humans. Every human goes through trauma
And change.
and some degree of pain, and that there's not something wrong with you if you're burnt or you feel like a stump.
Yeah.
I mean, I was feeling kind of stumpy when you came in. I was like, I need you today, Michael Kearney. And honestly, I was feeling and have been feeling a little bit burned and run down, and but co-regulating with you, like hearing your voice, you sharing this story, you reminding me of what I already know, right?
Right.
It kind of perked me up a bit. It strengthened me and enlivened me. And we need a lot. Sometimes we need a lot of that. Sometimes we just need a little bit of it. But these beautiful steps of deep resilience, or this path of deep resilience, I love how the metaphor is a one way you can remember it. But if we were just to repeat those 5 again, maybe you can just list them one at a time.
Okay, so the first one really is that we need self-care. That self-care is not just a good idea, it's essential for our survival. But it's not enough. Step 2 is we need healing connections. We need to know what they are or aren't. And if we don't recognize healing connections, see if there's something we can do to make some healing connections or to strengthen those we have that need strengthening. Step 3 is really about remembering our deeper nature as interbeings, as interdependent, that we are a small part of something much bigger. And then the 4th step is really recognizing what's always been present, but not recognized so easily. Nguma, who was at the Kearney, who is quoted.
Dakinis were these women, Tibetan spiritual figures that would come in the evening time, like at sunset, right? Am I on target
No, I
here?
think
I'm
you're
showing
right.
my
It sounds
Dakini
good.
knowledge.
Yeah.
I've got the Dakini knowledge, and they would come and give
give teachings.
So
Give,
we've got some
wisdom teachings.
women mystic here.
And
Okay.
Nguma was a very famous wisdom teacher, and she describes this essence, which is this sort of step 4, recognizing. She says, "So close, I do not recognize it. So simple, I cannot believe it. So profound, I cannot conceive of it. So good, I do not feel worthy of it." So that's what we're talking about, recognizing. It's here. It's always here. It's always been here. It will always be here. It's within each of us. We each have that within us. And then step 5 is really rooted in this way. We really can, like the tree's branches reaching out, the deeper the roots, the wider the branches. And that we can now engage, be present. And in the process of that, we too are being nourished, just as those little pine needles are making the sugar that are feeding the roots. It's this wonderful circle of compassion that we're part of.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you, Michael.
You're welcome.
Dr. Kearney, this is going to be coming out as a book.
This
fairly
little one is
soon.
going to be a booklet,
You have a booklet.
and hopefully it'll be out. I'm going to do it with Amazon Publishing, and it'll be out, I hope, within a month or so.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'll be easy to order.
Yeah.
Won't be. Yeah.
In the meantime, I'll connect people to Mindful Hearts programs, as well
Please.
as
Yeah.
your, you do have a shorter version of these teachings on deep resilience that I'll link to in the show notes, as well as your JAMA article that you had mentioned in terms of self-care in healthcare settings that I will link to as well. And just really appreciate you taking this time
Thank
today
you,
with
Dan.
us.
It's been really, really lovely to have this conversation.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Really lovely.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Wise Effort podcast. Wise Effort is about you taking your energy and putting it in the places that matter most to you. And when you do so, you'll get to savor the good of your life along the way. If you would like to become a member of the Wise Effort podcast, go to wiseeffort.com. And if you like this episode and think it would be helpful to somebody, please leave a review over at Podchaser. I would like to thank my team, my partner in all things, including the producer of this podcast, Craig, Ashley Hyatt, the podcast manager, and thank you to Ben Gold at Bell & Branch for our music. This podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only, and it's not meant to be a substitute for mental health treatments.